What this panel's purpose is to get people who've actually programmed VR very heavily and are experts in it, because it's a young industry. If you've been programming it 2 or 3 years, you're much ahead of the curve. Get them here. I have questions to ask them. You guys will have questions to ask them. The format we're going to go is I'll ask a question first. You ask a question. When I ask a question, if their answer has something you want to relate to, you can raise your hands and respond to it. But don't raise your hands for a new question until I ask for it, because I don't want people having their hands up for 10 minutes, which happened in the last panel. So let us finish the one question before we move on. I'll keep track of who raises their hands and I'll ask for you, okay? My name is Steve Sheets. I'm a software developer by trade, all areas, application developer, utility. I was the senior programmer at AOL for Macintosh years ago. User interface on Mac, iOS, Windows, Android, PC, and now virtual reality, mostly ARKit, Oculus Go, and Vive. I'm actually not as much of an expert as some of the people up here. Now, want to introduce yourselves, please?
Well, I guess I'll go. My name is John Nelson. I'm a software developer and computer scientist. I've been in the industry for almost 40 years. And I'm like Steve, kind of a jack of all trades. I've done everything from avionics work to enterprise software to virtual reality and augmented reality, which is my forte nowadays. I do a lot of Mac iOS, or Mac OS, and it's early in the morning, let me tell you. Mac OS 10 and iOS development. I programmed one of the first plasma displays, interactive plasma displays, touch panels, with McDonnell Douglas some years ago. And I gave a couple tracks at MAGFest and on virtual reality and AR, and yeah, I'm exploring this area, and I had a lot of hope for it.
Good morning. My name is Jordan Higgins. I'm an immersive design lead over at ByteCubed and agency chief for a technology and creative strategy consultancy located in the DC area. We are one of Microsoft's first mixed reality agency partners. We joined the program a couple years ago. Essentially, my boss got a HoloLens, and we kind of fell in love with it and just got really excited about the potential of spatial computing. So we've been, working with a lot of our work is in the public sector. We also have a commercial product out there that uses the HoloLens to help professional NFL and college football teams train. Right now, the Baltimore Ravens is one of our one of the teams helping us test it out, along with a few others. Yeah, so my background's primarily in UX, but I think I've become much more of a developer exploring VR and AR than I ever really anticipated being.
Jimmy?
Morning, everyone. My name is Jimmy Sambu. I've been doing development for 10 years, web and mobile development. And a little while back, I got my hands on the DK1, and since then I was just pretty interested in doing VR development on the side. I've done a small VR game at, I think it was last year's Global Game Jam, as well as
before that.
Might have been 2 years ago.
Yeah.
As well as a small demo for my company, but mostly
Tell
recently.
Tell the name of your small company.
Well, so currently I'm doing, I have a small startup called Future Fest, and the idea is we're bringing music festivals and experiences to you, as well as giving artists and DJs the ability to bring those experiences to you. So imagine a music festival within VR, and that's the thing we're trying to do.
Do that at the end, not the beginning.
Okay. I'm sorry. So, good morning. My name is Sadiq. My background is I did my master's in computer science in 1999, and after that I'm in the software development industry for the last 19 years, officially, unofficially, before that also. I started my career using a C, C++, and then somewhere in early 2004 switched to this C#. My entire career, except 1 or 2 years, is on Microsoft technology for entire career. So I love Microsoft technology. and that's my bread and butter. Currently, I'm working as a in a consultancy company, which is owned by me. I'm the CEO of the company and an architect also. Since 2016, okay. So the whole career is all about solving the enterprise business applications. So I'm not coming from the pure gaming background, but I'm coming from a hardcore programming background. That's for sure.
You're not coming from a commercial application.
Exactly.
You're enterprise.
Enterprise application.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Since 2016, I got the opportunity to work on the Microsoft HoloLens to solve the business problem because there are so many scenarios. And since then, I have been working on Microsoft technology on a mixed reality. So when I say mixed reality, it covers augmented reality as well as virtual reality. So that's a brief introduction. And also, I had one presentation on HoloLens on last Friday. Okay.
Yeah, I'll try this
Thank
one.
you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
I'm Michael Stauffer. I'm a longtime software developer, mostly medical imaging and music software. And I got into VR just over a year ago in doing gaming design class, and it's been a lot of fun. I pivoted recently to data visualization for medical research. We're looking to use VR for big data exploration. And I'm here with the game that I'm developing. It's called Groove Catcher. It's a VR rhythm game that I like to think at least extends the genre by really including melody and groove a lot. It's a dance-based rhythm game, a lot of flow movement in it. It's actually based on a music visualization tool. I'd like to talk to you about that.
Oh yeah, that sounds interesting.
So, well, VR's been great. It's actually, I don't know if you're new to VR, it's actually a lot easier to get into than you might think it is.
Which will probably be our first question.
I'm Cole Pritchard, and I'm one half of Studio 217.
And I'm Karen Chang. I'm the other half or co-founder of Studio 217. We are an indie game company. We've been here for 3 years exhibiting at MIVS, except for this year. We made the game Mr. Mart, which is kind of a humorous VR game where you play as a customer service agent at a really terrible grocery store. We started that game back in 2014 with the DK1, and then paired Elite Motion with that. And then ever since, we just kept keeping up with the tech up to now, which we're now primarily using Oculus. And then also my day job, I'm working for MedStar, which is a hospital system in the Baltimore, D.C. area, and they have a little simulation center. And they have a VR team as well to teach, doctors and nurses how to do certain procedures. So a lot of serious games as well. So yeah.
Did I hear you say Leap Motion?
That's how we started.
What's that?
That's how we started with the DK1 and Leap Motion.
Leap Motion. Okay, you're the second Leap Motion developer I have. Leap Motion is kind of the golden missing unicorn that everyone wants to get their hands on, but no one's ever seen. Because they were very limited on the developer, very expensive, and they were actually shipped only in certain geographic locations. Okay.
Are you confusing Magic Leap and Leap Motion?
No.
Yeah.
I thought you said Leap. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, this is early morning. I
Yes,
apologize.
yes,
So we do have a
Leap
magic.
Motion is a lot easier to get.
Yes,
Yeah.
Leap Motion is the sensors for the hand. That's the second time I've done that mistake.
Oh, I do that all the
Although,
time.
if you have Magic Leap questions, let us know.
We were going to have Magic Leap questions probably.
You should get them in the room.
Well, let me give you a question to begin with, okay?
Yeah.
Independent developers, I assume, first of all, who here is a programmer? Who here wants to program, to develop a developer, okay? Who here has a VR system? Which ones?
Live?
Five?
Five.
Oculus, any Rift? Go, that's a good one. Okay. My first question that, you guys answered my first question before. I was going to ask you a little more about which platforms you program on, but you gave that information. So let me go back to a general question here. For an independent developer who wants to start in VR, which hardware would you recommend they start with first? And is it a technical or a business decision?
Anyway.
Just jump in.
Okay. In my opinion, it should be a business decisions because in the end, right, so we are here to solve the problems, solving the problem in real life. So it would be nice if you pick the business problem and then solve accordingly, technically. So you can pick and choose whatever platform is ideal for that. So that's my, So
I think one of the things I tell, I teach a class on design and immersive, and one of the things I advise students to do is to get started with WebXR. It's web-based, it can be deployed to any platform. If you can get your hands on a cardboard, great. I mean, you know, essentially, I'm not even sure if it's a technical or a business decision. I think it's more of just kind of a budget decision. Like what do you know, the best thing you can do is get into some form of the hardware and start to develop, you know, see if you actually have a passion for it.
So I definitely disagree with that, because that talks to you the theories, but doesn't really give you the good idea of the tools. Because that type of level of working, when you're working with joints and you're working with you know, one segment to another, isn't the way you actually program a lot in the other development system later on. You work with much higher level abstractions. So you're kind of like teaching the building blocks. I don't know honestly whether or not I'd recommend someone aiming for Oculus Go at low end or the Vive Rift high end right now.
I think the barrier to entry with, if I could respond to that.
Go ahead.
Like, I mean, the barrier to entry with WebXR is very, very low. And the community has a ton of support and a ton of resources out there.
So you actually don't think they needed 3D glasses or anything to get started?
Well, I think what's nice about WebXR is that you can start developing for it within minutes, and it's able to be deployed on cardboard, on HTC Vive, on Go, whatever you have. You can build experience. You can get hands-on and start building things very, very quickly. And then from there, go into Unity, go into, you know, more advanced 3D tools. But just getting that you know, I think the hardest part about it is making that switch from sort of traditional 2D development and working off of a flat screen, starting to think more spatially about the experiences that you're building, and the barrier to entry is so low that it's so inexpensive. You know, if you've got the hardware, great. I mean, also I would say like if you're looking to get into it, my first recommendation is Windows MR, just because the cost of the hardware and the machines that can run it are a little bit. You know, although the Oculus is pretty inexpensive now too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
Well, I'm with Jordan here on the adopting a platform that gives you a diversity of experience. Although I don't have experience with WebXR, but I would recommend Unity. It's simple and easy to use. It's a multi-platform, so if you want to get started with a PC platform, you can do that, and then you can move on to virtual reality devices like the Vive and Oculus Go. As far as hardware platforms, I would definitely recommend the Oculus Go. It's very easily obtainable, it's inexpensive, it's simple, clean, compact. You don't have a lot of tethered cables, you don't need a high-end PC. The unit is the VR system in and of itself. And I can tell you from experience, though, that it's a little tricky to deal with in Unity. So WebXR might be your best option. But you can't go wrong with Unity because of the cross-platform development. So you transition from flat screen to the VR way of thinking. And there is a philosophy of thinking and development for VR, no doubt about that. And to support it, I think Unity would be a great thing, and it would get you into the mode of learning C#, which is a predominant language, and getting into the workflow and pattern of thinking about objects and scene graphs as represented in Unity. So I would say Oculus Go.
Okay.
Go for Oculus Go.
Question from the audience. Anyone have anything right now? We can keep going. Yes.
In developing, I guess, games for entertainment and serious games, are there any different considerations?
Between serious games in VR or VR and non-VR?
Both in the VR space, but I guess designing like a serious game like the medical application you're discussing versus, I guess, other VR applications?
That's a good question. Is there a difference between a game has a simpler interface and a more serious game, a serious application, especially in this era where gamification of even serious ones is a real issue?
Yeah, I mean, you need to think about who your customer, your clients are. So we find that in healthcare, a lot of the PCs are actually really old, right? They're still using Windows XP. They're still just old. So it's actually, we're finding it much easier to use the Windows mixed reality headsets because they're all inside-out tracking for doctors and nurses, whoever non-gamers, when they are trying to use VR and learn it, they're really intimidated. So when you have a simple headset like the Dell Visor, you're just plugging in HDMI and you're just plugging in a USB and you're just starting. So we're finding that that one's easier to run for those older machines, and it's cheaper and it's easier to get started in. But we also have Vive setups as well, just kind of on carts. So when we roll them in, we're like, oh, this is our like nicer, bigger room scale.
But you write both games and non-games, so is there a difference in the design of the
Of course.
application?
It's a lot slower. I mean, I feel like a lot of the mainstream games are, you're quick to start. The tutorial for a serious game is a lot more like handholdy. So it's like, hey, like take a look around you. And it's like really slow, like you have to look left, right, look forward, and then it's like, oh, look at your controller, really slow startup of everything, basically.
What else? Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say about the serious games versus games is that there's actually a lot, I agree with what you're saying about getting people on board, but when you're, and then when you're building it, there's a lot of the same considerations though, because you have to take into account how much someone needs to move around, how they're gonna move around, how they interact with things. So you can start with a game that's really fun to build and try out and move into a serious application, and you've learned a lot that you can apply. Because some of the onboarding is the kind of issues, the awkwardness often of onboarding people can be worked out in a simpler game, or if you come to a serious game in your work and then want to go to a game, you've learned a lot that you can apply to a game. So there really is a lot of more than you would think. There's a lot of overlap. And in case someone doesn't know what serious games, and that means those are applications that use gaming technology that have a lot of the interactivity of games, but are used for serious topics like medical training or some PTSD therapy treatments, things like that, where you're using it's not just for fun.
There was a real gray area between games and non-games. This kind of falls in between. In design, usually you group them together with non-games. It's just it's a term we came up with a few years back.
I want to say something too. When developing for entertainment purposes, one thing that I usually have to think about is making sure that we get our experience out to as many people as possible, so targeting a variety of devices. And one difference that we have to think about is the different control schemes that there are for the different platforms. Whether you're using a Vive or a Rift and having the full 6-DoF with controllers experience, or having a more limited experiences on the go or other devices. And I imagine that for serious applications, you might have full control using like one device or a few devices and knowing exactly what you're developing for.
One of the things we found at the museum track was that because you're doing museums and stuff like that, you get to pick the hardware, and you insist on the hardware. So in general, especially in the business world and enterprise, you get to pick what hardware is going to be used with it much more than you do the general game.
Yeah. It's all about the use case.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. What do you think is the difference between VR development and traditional coding? Besides the 3D aspect of it, is there anything inherently different? I'm going to give one quick example. VR coding, you spend constantly time putting on the mask, taking the mask off, typing, putting the mask on. But besides that, what other is a difference in design?
I think it's the single biggest difference is the interaction models, because all of a sudden you're in a real space. So a lot of great solutions already come around. So that was a lot of what's happened the past 2 or 3 years. I mean, some of these, I was reminded recently at a conference that VR is not 3 years old. It's 20-odd years old with
30.
These caves, 30 years.
30 years.
With these caves, which were these immersive small rooms with, people are actually still installing them because of the interactive model. So you can, in a cave where you walk into a big screen room, basically, you can look at someone else and talk to them. So until augmented reality is really more ready for a full field of view, people are building these caves. But in the cave, you have to work on the interaction. In the new VR, the headset VR, it's the interaction. How do I reach out and grab stuff? Do I want to have my user move around in the world, or do I give them some kind of, tele-arm presence where they can reach things that way?
Do you do that during development or before development?
Well, you think about it beforehand, but then you just test and iterate. I mean, that's like any game or any program. It happens a lot in gaming development because it tends to be a smaller team and you don't have a hierarchy where you're trying to design everything ahead of time like in some enterprise applications. So you're testing stuff, you think, well, we want our users to walk around the world and do this with these objects. And you try it and it's just awkward, and it might not be your code, it might just be that it's not an interaction that really works for whatever reason. People are figuring all this out on the fly.
Yeah, really, I think, to graduate from Microsoft's mutual agency partner program, one of the requirements was that we had to send a designer and a developer together out to Microsoft for 6 months to work side by side. The emphasis on the user experience side of it and those interaction models that we're just not used to. Like, you can hand somebody a phone or a laptop and they know how to use that. Once you put someone in a HoloLens, it's completely new, and it's it's an entirely new form of computing. One of the things that I definitely also recommend is checking out both Magic Leap and Microsoft have extensive documentation on their websites that are focused on design as well as development, and I think that's one of the biggest goals. I also would say like you really can't stress the importance of physical prototyping enough. Has anybody here played a game called I Expect You to Die? Yeah, it's a fantastic game, but there's a really great videos out there if you Google it of the company that made it, Shell Games, doing cardboard prototyping to play test things over and over and over. And I think they estimate that it saves them something like 20-30% on their development costs because they work out all these problems in very low fidelity very quickly before getting into, you basically have the plans to build your experience, tested inexpensively and quickly, and then you've got a better plan for building.
Question from the audience then.
Do you guys have any anecdotes on, not really a question, but if you noticed a problem that you thought, hey, that would be like really great to solve by VR, or hey, that if you captured that in the game, that would be really awesome, and like how you went about maybe making that a thing, if it were like a medical imaging thing or something like that.
Interesting question.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
In terms of like the serious games, one of the simulations that they have and that they teach is quality and safety of like a medical room or a patient room. And it's literally things like there's trash on the floor, or that waste bin, that like bio waste bin is still open or messy, and things like that. So making sure that doctors and nurses know that these things need to be taken care of, that's part of their training. And so one of the simulations they do is actually set up like a fake room, that's pretty accurate, and they literally just place these objects around, and that takes time to test it and then to reset it. And so we actually thought like, hey, that should be in VR. That's like a quick reset. That's an easy like load of a game or things like that. And then there's assessment built in with the programming, of course. So that's actually one of the good examples I've experienced.
Go ahead.
We had an early one. When we first started working with the HoloLens, we had to come up with a proof of concept that demonstrated a real world example of transformation. And the first thing we did was we partnered with a DoD and intelligence community partner to start to just basically to brainstorm a workshop. And every single idea we would challenge it with the question like, why is this better on HoloLens? And 9 times out of 10, it wouldn't be. But we ended up coming up with a concept around, they have what are called national special security events. So big, large-scale events that have multiple people involved with them. And what this agency did was they produced maps that look kind of like your gas station maps as a traditional print product. And through the process of brainstorming on the business use case, we realized that the real value from it came from the analysts that support it, that answer questions and make sure that people don't have conflicting information. If you remember the Obama inauguration from 2008, a lot of people got trapped in what was called the purple tunnel of doom because the maps were out of sync. So we turned that into a holographic sand table environment, like basically took this traditional product that had been done the same way for decades and turned it into a collaborative visualization that was constantly up to date and allowed for people to jump inside of a map and explore things. Like they could do all these things that they couldn't do before. And it's we only got to that point though by basically challenging every concept with, well, okay, why is this better in VR? Or why is this better in AR?
Well, do you follow up?
Just a quick question to that.
you said, challenge everything. Is that limiting to serious things, or like games as well? Like, why is this better on VR?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely look for somebody to speak more on the game side of it.
No, but it's the same thing. You see all kinds of games in VR, and not that I've tried them all, but you just wonder why, other than for the wow factor.
Yeah.
It's not necessary in VR. Like I see that a lot in the imaging that I'm looking at for data visualization. There's a lot of things that don't seem necessary in VR, although sometimes I actually understand later why. But for example, the best use case I found so far really uses VR as this medical imaging volume tool, where you do like a full CAT scan, which is like a 3D X-ray of any part of your body. And traditionally, on looking at it on a flat screen, you have to be really specialized to be able to go through the different planes of the image and understand what the shapes are and so on, or you're looking at 3 planes, 3 different angles at the same time. But you bring that into VR, and someone's got a really great implementation now, and it's just there in front of you, and you can spin it around, you can poke your head in there, you can change the transparency and see how things fit together, you can trace things very naturally, which you do a lot in medical research. You can see the shape of an organ, which surgeons want to do before surgery. So some things like that just really do work much better in VR, but they're fewer than there's fewer of those than applications that are out there so far. But you have to make all sorts of stuff and see what works.
John, you said you were going to say something?
Yeah, if you forgive me for being a little academic here, it sounds like I'm hearing multiple voices advocating an almost evolutionary computational approach where you hypothesize, build, test.
That's also software. That's iteration of software engineering.
Software, which is why my talk on VR had a flavor of prototyping, testing,
yes, you actually did.
Iterating, and going through multiple phases until I arrived at something that was. And I think that the more tangible, touchy-feely aspect of VR kind of supports that. In fact, that's why people are gravitating towards prototyping and what did you call it? Hard testing?
The technique's called brown boxing, but basically using low fidelity prototyping.
Right.
Cheap cardboard,
cheap cardboard
stuff
and
to
duct tape
abstract.
and that kind of stuff. But that's physical testing. You can also, and Unity supports prototyping easily because
very fast.
You drag prefabs into your scene and hook them up, and I demonstrated several prototypes in my talk. So it sounds like we're tending towards more modeling and simulation and testing with the end users, which is why the designers and the engineers are going hand in hand to the client sites.
Let me add one thing to this conversation. As an independent developer, I'm always balancing contracts versus what I call speculative work, which is work where I'm trying to write a game I'm actually going to sell and ship. If I'm too experimental, I spend too much time iteration and changing things that don't work. If I'm not experimental enough, the software is not interesting. So it's always a fine balance. I know people who never ship. There's actually a t-shirt sold that sometimes you reach the point where you have to shoot the programmer and ship the damn product. I learned that at Apple, matter of fact.
And that's industry-wide because we're engineers, or at least a lot of us are engineers, and we have this mindset of it's got to be perfect. I've got to build this beautiful, shiny
Perfection
thing.
is the enemy of good.
Yes.
I also,
Okay.
Can
Now,
I add one more thing on that?
what's that?
Can I add one more thing on that?
Sure.
The follow-up question. Our studios, it's just us two, and we actually started as interactive artists, and then we kind of came into programming. So we didn't actually learn traditional programming, but we also just focused on interaction. And so to tag on the indie game side of things, you want to think about literally why am I holding a controller, and why is there a trigger? And with our game, we didn't have these controllers yet, but we had a headset, and we eventually used leap motion. So we're like, what can we make the player do that isn't, again, like what you said on like a 2D screen? So our game that's humorous, we wanted to make people move their body. And what can we do that by punching these fake customers away from your desk and getting points? And so it's more about like, what can we make the player do that's not just holding an Xbox controller and just staring at a screen, but more about like, in VR now we can crouch, we can walk around, we can run. Like those in themselves are mechanics to think about in games. And what can you think about, like, what is interesting in that? And figure out a game
You seem to
structure.
have hit a good question. More people want to talk. Go ahead, Jim.
So also thinking about it from the entertainment side of things, we were asking what is the difference between VR and and offering your experience as either like a movie or a video game. And one of the things that we were thinking about is VR gives you the ability to be present in the moment. So imagine if you wanted to view your favorite music festival, you could go onto YouTube and watch it in a YouTube video, and that's fine. But if we were able to bring that into VR, you can actually be in the music festival, in the experience, and that's just something that no other medium can offer you for entertainment, at least.
Okay, let me continue on, and this is the big question that's possibly a religious question. Unity and Game Engine and the Unreal Game Engines are by far the two most popular across-platform 2D, 3D ones. Exact percentages are difficult to find, but most people agree that Unity is more popular and possibly Unreal is more powerful in the long run. What would you recommend for someone who's a new programmer, and what would you recommend for someone who's an experienced programmer to do a project?
I would like to go for it. So if you are new programmers, go for a Unity. That's an easy path. And if you are in a startup, go for Unity. That's the one point. That's so obvious because the learning curve is less as compared to the Unreal. That's number 1 point. But if you wanted to go above and beyond, and if your use case, your application requires so much computation and so much graphics and so much power you want to gain for your applications, optimization from every point of view, go for Unreal. And here are the reasons for it. Unreal is based on a C++. C++ by nature is very powerful, but at the same time, it has its own learning curve. But same goes with Unreal also. Unreal also has a same learning curve. Unity has a shortcut. But these are the two main points. Apart from that, and as a general rule of thumb, people make one mistake. Apart from choosing Unity or Unreal versus, they learn programming through the engine, using an engine, which is a really a bad choice. It may make you happy because you can start seeing the results. Okay, this is how to do programming in Unity. You can go to some extent, but you cannot cross the threshold. So if you are new in programming, either C# side or C++ side, I highly recommend you to learn through a known gaming engine platform, so that you can understand in and outs of programming language. Because game engine provides you some sort of framework. You have to learn in that particular framework. They cannot give you the power of understanding the language which you are using in programming languages. So it is very necessary. Anyone who is going to this gaming zone or gaming area, either it's a VR, AR, or whatever XR flavors is, or any programming flavor, learn the programming language without learning, without the interface of the game engine. This will make you a solid coder, because suppose you wanted to go for iteration of next level gaming zone or next level of your application, you cannot go that threshold. And I've seen in my career, so many companies come up and they wipe out in 2 or 3 years because they start believing that, okay, we are awesome, we are the best. They make them overconfident, and that overconfidence is not good for your strategy, for your career growth. So that's advice. Yeah.
I'd also just just weigh in on it. I would say I would almost always recommend Unity because of the amount of documentation and support that's out there for getting started.
Huge community.
Yeah, and in particular with Windows Mixed Reality and Magic Leap. Magic Leap actually has sections of their documentation devoted to Unreal and Unity, but the Microsoft Mixed Reality Toolkit, Oculus, I know, has a lot of great Unity framework stuff. Basically, on a Microsoft, I was in a HoloLens developer chat the other day where we were talking about how the vast majority of people, even in commercial projects, are using things from these toolkits that are huge accelerators, and particularly a lot of us are doing this as R&D in the context of our jobs, where time is absolutely money. The less we can spend on R&D, the more that they're. So I think Unity is a huge accelerator if you're brand new to it.
Okay.
One quick note. I agree with what you're saying for the long term, if you want to make a career out of programming or game programming. But if that's going to stop you from starting because you feel like
Sure.
you have to learn programming more traditionally first, don't let that stop you.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
You can jump in and learn some stuff, and then you might go back elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is the long-term perspective is like that. But
That's true. If
Most SDKs were designed to teach you basically to call the SDK in an almost procedural, maybe not very much object-oriented. It doesn't teach you very much about interfaces, doesn't teach you very much about closures, and some advanced features which really would make your life easier in your code, but not using the toolkit. So if you only use the toolkit, you won't use the other features. They won't teach you it.
You know, I agree with every sentiment that was mentioned here, and I just want to add that I'm an Apple developer, and so I've developed under Mac OS 10 and iOS, and I started developing game code with SceneKit, a very powerful API, but that's strict coding. There's no IDE, no editor, no environment. It was just straight Swift code and or Objective-C code and the API. The first IDE that I actually used in game engines, I guess, was Unity, which enabled very fast, quick prototyping and development. But I'm thinking about going beyond Unity now and adopting Unreal Engine because what I've seen in the indie game space. It's very powerful, it's beautiful. It's intimidating because you're going to deal with C++ coding, and my understanding is it's a steep learning curve, but they have a thing called the Blueprint system, which is like a macro language, which allows you to build patterns, game patterns quickly, from what I understand. So I think flexibility is necessary. You can't have tunnel vision on any one platform. Because the industry and the technology are moving so quickly, you have to sort of like go with the flow. Go with prototyping with Unity, adopt an engine like Unreal, look at a number of different things, and be careful not get stuck.
This industry is moving too fast. Can you imagine 2 years from now, compared to what we've done in the past 2 years? The museum track had that exact problem. The museums try to budget for a 5-year time period for their displays. And VR project that was designed 3 years ago would be obsolete now. Question from the audience, what do we have? Way in the back.
Yeah, hey, good morning. You kind of talked about Unity and you talked about Unreal as far as development. Did any of y'all have any experience or expertise in web-based VR?
We started a question, and he said that at the very beginning he mentioned that it's going to use, I remember VRML back when we did that originally. Everyone pronounced it differently.
I would say WebXR is probably the technology that I'm most excited about right now, the democratization of immersive experiences.
However, A-Frame is also being popular.
Well, so A-Frame is a JavaScript library it's WebVR. Amazon Sumerian is another graphical user interface that Amazon has put out there that enables some incredibly rich, dynamic, and experiences, and it ties into other services like, you can build a full interactive VR chatbot. We did a demo one night for VR UXDC where we built a Lex chatbot for a VR host avatar that you could book a hotel room through. You could program through all the logic in under 30 minutes. Like the ability of WebXR to prototype and even release production experiences. It's so fast, and the community, it started out of Mozilla, Google jumped on, Apple jumped on, Facebook jumped on, and the community now, look up A-Frame, and as a starting point, and it's incredibly powerful what you can do, and deploy to, there's libraries to support mobile devices, to support the Oculus, to support Windows MR, Vive, like you can deploy across multiple things. Now, in practice, it doesn't necessarily turn out that easily all the time, but the potential's there, and it's moving so quickly.
It's also a little hard sometimes to release as a commercial application.
Yeah.
I used React VR, and it was a very small community. Would you say A-Frame is probably the most robust option for web development?
The gentleman from Vive used to come in and give me training in our area. He has since moved back to the main office, but when he came out for training, A-Frame was what he was teaching.
Perhaps a year ago, a gamer friend of mine mentioned that he was playing Quake, WebQuake, and I looked at him like he was insane. How could you play something like Quake through the web? but it is actually possible using, I guess it's using WebGL and probably some other frameworks. And it sounds like Jordan is saying that they can quickly prototype in the web using a WebXR kind of framework.
Also check out the Firefox Reality browser. This is basically, it's a WebVR enabled browser that is, I think it's available for Google Daydream, for Vive, for Oculus, for Windows MR, that gives you a consistent delivery platform. I mean, again, it's hard to commercialize it, but in terms of deploying things and I'm almost seeing it as the way that we deliver content-rich websites. We can now add immersive capabilities to that as well for things like, experiences that we want to deploy to either a very specific location or across a very broad audience.
Does Jordan, does A-Frame work with headsets, Oculus Go?
Oh yeah, and they've got controller support for the different basically the 6 degree of freedom controllers, the 3 degree of freedom controllers. It takes that gets a little more complicated, but it's all basically JavaScript based.
Check out aframe.io.
Yeah.
Actually, that will lead into a couple questions I have. We're going to do a couple quick questions here, a little faster. Any reason nowadays to use OpenGL or Metal or anything really low level? Because if you do that, you have to worry about tracking yourself rather than using the higher level stuff. Has anyone had any reason to go in that level? Because back in the old days, a traditional gamer, there was a certain percentage of people who didn't use Unity for 2D and did do OpenGL.
Can I address that?
Yeah.
I don't want to monopolize the time, but Apple's AR kit uses Metal and a number of different technologies and binds them together so you're not stuck with one technology. And it uses Metal as well. The Apple SwiftShot demo.
Well, that's because their AR kit allows you to plug into their tracking.
That's right.
You don't have to write it yourself. So they have an advantage.
If you went down to OpenGL, you'd have to write everything yourself. And I wouldn't even consider OpenGL anymore. Apple's Metal or one of the PC-based frameworks.
For on the PC world, is there any reason to do OpenGL?
It's a good learning exercise.
Okay, then another quick question. What communities? We've already talked about the fact that Unity itself has a community, but other communities as a VR developer should you be a member of? Gamma Sutra, Stack Overflow, specific forums do you go to? There are some VR organizations out there. Some of them are very expensive, and I'm not sure they're good for beginners. What would you recommend?
I would say one of the most important communities we're part of is not web-based, but there's a community of independent developers in Baltimore and in this area and the MIVS crowd and stuff. Just knowing people in the area that you can talk to and meet up with and form connections with. That's one of the most important ones, in addition to the Unity forum, which is great. But yeah.
I was actually looking for online forums but I can see your point.
Slack channels.
Slack channels.
Yeah, there's the Holo Developer Slack, A-Frame Slack. Any others that any people are belong to?
Yeah, this is a Holo specifically.
I'm not sure if it counts as a community, but Oculus has been very helpful sending, they've been sending free, they have a really good beginner developer program called Oculus Start. I'm looking at my shirt here because I forgot the name. But they send things like swag and also free development devices as well. Well, normal devices that you can use for development.
There are also some communities on Facebook. I know this seems kind of not as professional maybe, but if you snoop around, there are VR communities there for specific Steam VR, Oculus. Some of them get kind of religious and kind of, it gets a little bipolar, but if you stay, kind of calm about it, it should be okay. There's also a woman in VR and AR group, so just trying to get women in tech.
That's true.
So there's also that available.
I wasn't doing this to announce this, but most of the people on this table who are actually not this talk but other talks are from the DC meetup group for DC VR. Yeah. So if you're in the DC area, please come join us. There's 2 chapters. There's one in DC and one in Northern Virginia. We meet once a month. And look it up, just DC VR meetup. Okay, let's take one from the audience.
Are there any particular marketing strategies or in-game experiences that you've encountered so far?
Oh, I am so glad I got some of you guys on this because I know our side of the table is not heavy in that area.
No, I know most of you probably aren't on the marketing side.
No, we actually have some developers here. What would you guys say?
Sure. But whether it's something that you're tying in within the game or something that you're doing to encourage sharing of products. So, yeah, what do you say?
Wait, do you mean encouraging that within the game?
Yeah, or I'm just giving that as an
example. So how to market your starting game. That's a great question. I mean, that's why I'm here. I want people to play the game and hopefully talk about it, push social media sharing, as politely as you can. But people want to help, so if they like your game at all, they'll want to help. So we were downstairs and people play the game. I make a little video of them, and then afterwards they say, "Hey, will you share this on social media?" And just try to get the word out there in that way. But really, not just so coming to events like this is great for marketing because when you're small, you're not going to spend a lot of money. I mean, the money. If I spent the same amount of money on marketing on Facebook or so, it wouldn't have the same impact because people playing your game is just much more powerful. And you have to start to get that core people who want to follow you and spread the word. And then you also get the feedback. And you have to be able to listen. This goes back to what you always hear at any of these panels, even not just VRs. Get feedback from your test users, iterate, feedback, iterate, feedback, iterate, and you got to listen. You can't take it personally when they don't like something.
Let me mention one other thing. According to Road to VR, which I track as an online VR newsletter, of the top 10 VR apps in Steam VR, a good percentage of them were early adapters. They were absolutely put in there early to ship so people could test it for free, and that made a big difference. So you may want to look about that. Yeah. Have you guys adopted an early adapter type of program?
Yeah, mine is not really, well, it's just now kind of stable enough where...
Are you planning to?
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely going to do that because especially after feedback from this weekend, people say, listen, I'll just buy it now. I don't need all the other the things that you want to add to it. I just want to play it now. So I'm more encouraged to get into the early adopter program sooner before I thought would be reasonable. But so I've just got some bad bugs stabilized recently, so a couple more optimizations, and I'm going to go early adopter for those people who really just want to try it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great time to begin because I think people are really hungry for new experiences and new content. Sure. When something new comes out, like you see almost like this ripple effect of people talking about it. And I think with the Oculus Go over the holidays, was in the Facebook groups there just kind of this constant stream of people like okay, what can I do next? What can I do next? So I think that's like you were talking about the perfect nothing they make good. Like get something out there and people will try it out a bit.
Yeah.
So I have a follow-on question for the panel. How do you foster viral marketing? Word of mouth.
Yeah, I'm new to that too, but like I just said, to get people to play it, go to local meetups, go to small events. Any size where you have the time to do it, and you don't know who's going to play it and have followers.
Is there any difference between VR versus non-VR? Because what you're describing is the traditional methodology for small independent developers.
Yeah, but I don't think so. Except for VR, I mean, if you're VR, you have to experience it. So if you don't have a VR rig, you can't just play it online. But okay. The other thing with VR is that watching a gameplay video is much different online than for a traditional game. A traditional game, you can see what's going on. In VR, like my game, it looks crazy and impossible, and you don't really know what's going on online. So make the extra effort to make a mixed reality video where you show a real person in that VR world playing the game, because then someone can watch it in 10 seconds.
Yeah, your game especially
is
good to have people watching play it.
That's essential, though. I think if there's one technique that I would explore for marketing any experience, whether it's commercial or game or otherwise. I mean, we're looking at this for our industry customers too, is being able to show videos of people in experience that I think it's called Live, I think is the
Live
software.
and Mixcraft are the two main ones, and it's super easy. I mean, not super easy, but it's much easier than you think.
Yeah. Well, because I remember we used to try to make spectator view videos with the HoloLens that involved taking one $3,000 HoloLens, a huge camera, very expensive configuration. Now it's like so much easier to do that, and it's so powerful. You can get that out there on YouTube and Instagram and reach a much wider audience that way.
I just did it in my little home office for I got a web camera and a green screen off of Amazon, and I don't know, $150 or so.
That's awesome.
Johnny,
Yeah.
one
Plugins are free.
Oh, I was just wondering, has anyone used a Kickstarter or GoFundMe to promote their project? And because that's one of the great things about Kickstarter and the other crowd-funded projects is not so much that you're getting funded, but that you're getting the word out and marketing and stuff.
You're using Kickstarter as a marketing tool, not a funding tool.
Although actually, theoretically, if you do a Kickstarter, you should have your clientele cultivated long before you even start the Kickstarter.
I know 2 developers who had the product completely done before they did the Kickstarter.
Yeah,
It
I've
was
heard that
strictly
too.
Marketing.
Yeah. Well, that is the thing that I hear when I research Kickstarter is that it's easy for them to fizzle out, because if you don't have followers, who's going to jump in? So there's that point where if you use it strictly for marketing, you've already got your followers. But if you have some amount of followers, I don't know what that magic number is yet. Depends on how enthusiastic they are. So I'm waiting for a Kickstarter till I have some number. I'm not sure what that number is. I mean, a couple thousand, few thousand, so that it has a chance to snowball. If those followers are enthusiastic within a genre, like I'm in this rhythm game genre, and that the players in that genre are pretty fanatical. So if I get the right ones, I don't need as many, I think, because it's a very niche crowd.
Let's go to the next question. How do you test for VR? I mean, do you do automatic testing tools? Do you add scripts? Because you can't test everything by having the person's VR headset on in it. You actually have to have some sort of methodology. What do you do?
We usually kind of brute force it. We don't really write anything fancy. A lot of our playtest is just closely watching and listening. So often we just bribe people to come over to our house, and we'll feed them, and we'll have them playtest their game for a couple hours and just literally listen, like, was this fun? Did you, we think of the right questions to ask. Like, was it even comfortable? Did you get sick, right? And just
Traditional user tester, then.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's...
By the way, if any of you have ever done user testing before, number 1 rule, you stay quiet. Sit on your hands. Do not jump in to correct them, because if they made a mistake, it was you making the mistake for them. You don't correct them right there. Don't tell them they're doing it wrong.
And the other advice is not to get too defensive. Something that we've seen in other conventions or games that we play, we try to say like, oh, like we noticed that this is something we might change, or we had confusion here, and some people are just like, oh no, we're gonna fix that. But or have some other excuse, but instead just write that down and think about why that player experienced it. Is it consistent? Consider like how many numbers of people have that experience. So that's really important.
Anyone else comment about that? Does that pretty much cover it?
Well, I would say in my day job, when we're on top of things, we do unit testing, which means you write small little tests for each bit of code. You try to have your code really fragmented. I mean, nicely modularized. But doing this in my spare time, I'm just trying to get it working as fast as I can, and as well as I can to build a momentum and not want to get slowed down by doing things properly, really. Oh, yeah. And so we'll go back and fix it later. If it takes off, you can go back and fix the most important, the biggest problems that you made later. But in VR, setting things up, testing automatically is hard because so much of it is the user interaction, and you could spend all your time coding an AI to make fake realistic user interaction.
Let me give you one lead in then, okay?
Yeah.
Traditional gamers usually wants to have some sort of scripting capability, because if they get a bug somewhere in the code, they don't want to have to spend half an hour set up in the game to get there. They want to jump to right that spot with the game all set up, ready to test the bug. It's the same type of, do you have tools for VR with that, or is that usually not what you do?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, with Windows MR, you basically got Visual Studio, which has all the same. Because if you're familiar with that, then it's makes it very easy to track stuff down when there's a problem.
But you can play back. I mean, if you do you can do similar design methodologies. Where you record all the activity that's happening. Mm-hmm. And then so that you can replay it and get to that point. And I haven't spent the time to do that yet.
So you have a log,
I should do that.
A VR log in there.
Yeah, well, you can do that. You can record all the user interactions with the controllers and the headset, just like you do in a game controller interactions, and recreate the state of the game to try and find that sort of weird bug that's really hard to recreate. That is a great thing to do. Haven't done it myself, even though I do record everything anyway. So it's kind of silly. So I could go back through that route. I mean, it's something that when I push, so when I'm debugging it myself, I'm right there. Trying to debug outside users is a lot harder. So I can totally see putting in usage statistics and that kind of tracking in the log so that I can upload that so that alpha testers will say, all right, hit this button, upload me that, so I can try to replay it and recreate that, because you can't run it yourself again the way they did unless you've recorded everything. And it sounds hard, but it's actually, it's easier than you think, because you're tracking everything anyway in VR. All you do is just log it to an extra file, and you can.
In theory, I thought that was what you're supposed to do. In practice, I've never done it either.
Yeah, I know, because it takes more time, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to get the thing working, so it's hard.
Audience question. In the back first.
Just a quick follow-up from what you mentioned before, recording for game trailers and whatnot. Are there any recommended tools or common tools that people use to help record not just the game, but also the VR user?
You said there were some tools for that.
What were the names?
Yeah, so the names for so what we mentioned before, it's particular to VR, is this mixed reality experience. So you have a live action camera, you get a stream from that filming the player. That camera, so then you use some tools. The two ones I've used are called Mixcast. That's one of them. The other one's either Live or Live. I've heard it pronounced the same way, both ways, L-I-V. They both have plugins for Unity and I believe Unreal as well. It's really easy to get that in there.
Web bloggers use that for playing games.
Exactly. So you'll see Twitch streamers use that to show themselves in the VR game. And what it does basically is you have to register, calibrate your camera to the VR world, and they have tools to do that in the toolkits, and to make that pretty easy. They work a lot better now than when I first tried them. And once the camera knows where it is in the virtual world, it takes that stream, and then the software itself segments your virtual world so that there's a background and a foreground stream, and then it has the real live camera stream, and then it composites it for you. It really couldn't be easier. It does it all, and then you just screen capture that.
Now you had, that really is a follow-up question, so we'll go to the other person's question. Who had a question out here? You did? Okay.
I played a lot of VR video games, and one of the magical things that is kind of interesting to me is the variance in fidelity. So you can have a game that's basically just blocks and stuff, and you can have games that are very visually detailed and stuff. And I've seen in across the spectrum, regardless of the fidelity, it's still super immersive. So I wanted to know if you guys had thought about that, what kind of tricks you guys do to make it immersive, and what sort of fidelity you guys choose to put in your games.
And a lot of it comes down to target platform, because it really, it was mentioned on the other panel that your life really rapidly becomes a lot of finding tips and tricks to do things. I know one thing that we do with 3D models is sometimes we'll bake in the lighting, but we're trying to squeeze every single ounce of performance that you can and maintain a frame rate in each eye to avoid people getting sick.
But even more than that, you have to look at your target audience. Okay, exactly. Cartoonish VR is wonderful. There is a certain market that likes realistic, especially let's say zombie horror. There are cartoonish zombie games out there that are immensely popular, and there are ones that are much more realistic, scare the hell out of you type of games. And which one you want market determines what type of resolution you're going to do.
And actually, the cartoony zombies, I'm thinking specifically of the Vive Zombies game, is the little paper cutout zombies that walk, or that they don't even walk practically. They
slide.
They just sort of slide.
Incessantly come at you.
I love that game.
Hillbilly zombies. And
we all play it.
There are all kinds of tropes that go along with it. So it's really a very fun, children can play it, and they won't get scared. So, and that also helps the performance, because you're just sliding 2D layers. And this isn't ultra realistic Doom, ultimate kind of rendering with pre-baked lighting and all that. It's just very, very simple cardboard cutouts, but it works well for the genre.
Yeah.
Minecraft.
It depends on your style. What is the audience you're designing for, and what is the overall aesthetic you're going for?
Now that said, my prototypes that were developed in Unity, they look gorgeous on the Mac. I mean, we're talking 3,000 by 4,000 pixels, beautiful lighting, shading, all kinds of stuff. It looks gorgeous on the Mac, but then when you boil it down and extrude it for the Oculus Go, a lot of the lighting gets dumbed down, and because it has to pre-bake the stuff in, but the Oculus Go can't handle the resolution that the Mac can. Even though the Oculus Go has a dedicated processor, and the Mac's GPUs are known to be kind of shortfalling, but yeah, you can definitely see a difference in quality. So you have to consider the platform as well.
You gotta realize the low-end graphics on the screens and the glasses are pretty much the same as the high-end one. In some instances, they're the same hardware. It's the GPU chip that's different, and that's what we're talking about.
So I think the question was also asking about generally an immersion. So the visual aspect is the first thing you think of, and it's amazing how low fidelity you can have and feel immersed. But then to enhance the immersion, right, then you have to think about audio.
Yes.
You want environmental sound, you want spatial cues, which is all in the toolkits. You can do this very easily. So nice attention to details when something falls over here, a nice sound that you can hear in space, a little bit of ambient sound that maybe moves around. In haptics are very great for immersion. Like in my game, you're catching these music lines, and when you catch them, I just turn the haptics on. But half the people who come out of it say, "Oh, it was so great. I felt the buzzing in my hand just made me feel connected to that musical line." And it's very simple, but you tune it so that it feels the right. It has slight variations for different cues in the game, and you just play around with those. But you think about more than just the fidelity. Don't worry about getting caught up in the visual fidelity. I would say that the most important thing is the gameplay and the interaction. Don't spend your time on the visuals unless you're explicitly developing a realistic game. Spend your time on the gameplay and the interaction and the audio and the haptics. Get that right, and then you can make the visuals as cool as you want that the processor will handle for the platform you're working on. But
John,
get the interaction right.
John likes to use a quote specifically about how many senses. The more senses you have.
Yeah, it's called cross-modal. It's a trick of the brain. You can show the brain the 3D visuals, and the brain accepts that. But if you add audio, if you add haptic feedback, the fusion of all the senses together fools the brain into thinking it really is. So
it's more than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, I saw on Japanese television a demo where they had haptic feedback. The player was shown one thing, like a cylinder, but the haptic feedback gloves had the player holding a sphere, and the player thought they had a vase shape, and just because of the haptic feedback was telling them, oh, you have a round object, the visuals were saying you have a linear object. And the brain was fusing it together. And so if you use all the senses, all the fusion of all the data sources, the sensory inputs, you can really fool the brain into thinking something that really isn't there.
We actually have reached the end of time, but we don't have another one after us, so I'm just going to keep going until you guys want us to leave. You want to keep going? Okay.
5 minutes left.
Oh, 5 minutes left. Hey, no.
I've got a suggested question for John, since you're developing on Mac, which is unusual in VR because of the GPU.
Yeah.
If you might want to mention that, why are you on Mac and what's the
We're
pros
not on
and
Mac
cons?
programming VR. We are on Mac programming iPhone.
Oh, okay, like AR stuff. I see. I get it. All right, got it.
I just happen to be a Mac developer, and I have a lot of Macs rolling around my place.
And Oculus Go can be programmed on Mac just as easily as the PC.
Okay.
It's standalone, just point the device.
You're doing what's called side loading.
Yeah, because you're running it on the external device.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
And I have a feeling Oculus Quest is going to be the same way.
Yeah.
And that's a property of Unity. Unity is cross-platform, so I can develop on the Mac and for a variety of devices. But you can just as easily use PC.
Okay, let me, people in the audience, how are they going to go back to their boss and say, I want to be trained in VR, I want us to work on a VR project. How can you justify it right now? Because we still are talking about a very small percentage of the market. How do you go back and get involved with this? Because the best way to get trained in this is to have someone else pay you to do it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, I would say build something small and simple and show them. There's really no substitute for an experience that you can say, I created this and we could do, like you really want to hook the imagination about what the potential of that investment
Good
is.
answer.
Yeah, prototyping, yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, spend a little time, whatever industry you're in, spend some time looking at what people are doing in VR. If no one's doing something in VR, then you're actually in a good space because you can find that little thing that could be helped by VR and make that simple prototype. Again, just simple, doesn't have to be great, but it has to show what you can do differently in VR for your use case there. If other people are doing something in VR, see what they're doing, try to read about it, find what people are talking about it, and see how your company might be able to brand it or use what their IP, put that in that same kind of application so that it makes it unique for them, and they might be motivated then to have you develop something for them.
Any other ideas, sir?
I think if you can make it sound like that you can make money off of it, that's going to please whoever's funding your company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And promotional, sorry, I should say that companies love, so I know a small gaming group that they end up doing a lot of bespoke games for companies who want their branding in a little game, just get that in, and then so they go to trade shows and then you play they give people a headset and they play their little game that's branded for their company. And it seems silly, but because VR still is new and a lot of people still haven't done it, it makes an impression, and it's an interesting and quick way to get a different kind of market experience. So even if you don't have a real VR product, exactly.
a demonstration to show, hey, yes, we're a bleeding edge company.
Yeah. Or even just some fun little game that has your company logo in the background that people notice when even as silly as that, because at trade shows people will stand in line to do some VR. And you can convince your boss that way, like, listen, we're going to have the longest line at the trade show because we get a VR game that features our logo and something about our product.
Yeah, if you're a product-based company, do something that helps market that product. If you're a services-based business, then think about who your customers are and what might resonate with them.
Just one note. They say that the goal of a business is either one, to make profit, or two, to make the process more efficient so they make more profit. And if you can convince your boss that your VR solution affects their bottom line, that's probably the best way to pitch it.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question here. Nowadays, we all start up our apps with a tutorial to show them how to do the app. A wizard, some sort of tutorial thing. In VR, a lot of times, we also have to give them a tutorial of how to actually use the VR, because a lot of times these are the first time they've used it. Or is that tutorial going to be dropped over time because people get used to VR? Do you think your app should always have a tutorial in the beginning to teach them the basic functions of the VR system?
Yeah, use tutorial for basic learning purposes, initial. But other than that, you have to do by yourself,
Okay. Anyone disagree with that idea?
Yeah, I think over time, we talked about how Walmart has bought 17,000 Oculus Go's. Over time, I don't think people will, as they become, if this technology continues to grow like that, people will be familiar with how to use it. They'll require less training, but I think that just kind of remains to be seen in what devices come out.
It's like the mouse-driven interface. It was brand new when the Mac came out, and people had to be handheld, but eventually the cultural gestalt will adapt to it. And
any last questions from the audience?
Going back to education, if somebody was brand new and they had a solid year to dedicate towards learning, to becoming a programmer, becoming somebody who works in VR, is it better to go, in your opinions, like self-taught versus a school like Full Sail University versus a computer science degree at a university?
There's an in-between range, which is to use one of the online Udemy type of training, which is quite good. Some of the mini courses, which is what my recommendation would be.
Yeah, the Udemy courses are probably the best bet of it, but it really depends on how you learn best. And I mean, any of those modalities, you can have, you should have small digestible projects that build off of each other in any good program. But I would definitely think, like, if you're going to make that year-long investment, have like a real talk discussion with yourself, kind of about like what will get me the most return on that investment? How do I learn best? And what would I say?
Okay.
Online versus interaction is also necessary. But it depends upon you.
There's a lot of online communities where you get that now, though.
Exactly. Sure.
One last question for all of us: is it possible for an independent developer to make money on VR?
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Possible, yes.
A lot of work.
You still have to work. It may rain frogs today, too.
Best way of doing it?
I would not necessarily look for an immediate payout.
Best
Years
way,
ago, I would've
best
said
way of
no.
doing it, I would say, actually, best way I would do it is look for industry contracts to support your gaming studio.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for
And
coming.
grants.
Thank you for,
And grants,
thank you
yeah.
for the
Thank you so much.